Okay, now let's have a look at learning task 003, calculated fields. So it says open the attached Excel file, there it is there, and add data for 4 tests where you use the rand between function to generate test marks between 8 and 20. Now the rand between will generate a random number between 8 and 20 inclusive, so you could get an 8 and a 20. So let's go in, I've got the file loaded already into Excel, and I'll just type in equals rand between bracket. Notice we've got bottom and top there. The bottom number is 8 and the top number is 20. Enter. So it's generated the first one, it's generated a random number 14. Is that between 8 and 20? Yes, of course it is. So let's just extend that across. Notice how it's generated extra random numbers. It updated the first one when I did that operation, but that's fine. Doesn't particularly matter. And then let's drag that down so we've got random numbers for all of those students. So we've got a large cohort of students there. We've got about 40 students, and they've done 4 tests. Test 1, Test 2, Test 3. And we've got a series of random marks between 8 and 20 for each student for each of the 4 tests. Okay, so it looks like we've done that part. So let's go back. So it's saying import the data into Access and name the table sensibly. Okay, so let's go to Access and get that ready. So I want to do a file, new blank database, create. It doesn't matter, I'll leave it as called database 7. And we'll click on the star. We get that ready. Now we want to select the data. Now I don't want to select the heading. So what I can do, if you hold down the Control and then the Shift key and hit the right arrow, that will select the entire record, and then hit the down arrow and you'll get all of the records selected. Then click or press Control C to copy all of that data. And then we'll go back to Access, and if we click on the star, just make sure that's ready, and Control V, and it's asking you are about to paste 40 records. Are you sure you want to paste these records? Yep, why not? So have we done? Now notice that bug still seems to be happening. We've lost the student ID, but as it happens, the ID field has given us exactly the same data. So let's just rename that student ID. And we better rename all the other fields as well to something more sensible. So we've got F name, L name, email, gender, and these are the test results. Let's just call that test 1. Let's copy that. Test 2, test 3, and test 4. Right, and we want to save that as, now remember the prefix for tables is TBL, and let's name that Mark Book. Oh, we've got a typo there. Let's get rid of that. That looks about right, and so okay. All right, so we've got a table there with student names and their results in Access. So let's go back to the learning task. So we've done the naming of the table. Now we need to create a query which creates 5 new fields, T1% through T4%, as well as a field called average. And we've got a hint there, T1%. It's going to be the test 1 divided by 20 times 100. So it's basically converting the raw test result into a percentage score. Okay, so let's go back here. Now let's go to create and then query design. And we want the fields to access the fields from the markbook. Let's close that. Don't need. Okay, so there's all our fields. Now, what do we need? We need the, let's put the first name and last name in there, so we know who we're referring to. And probably don't need the raw score. So let's create a field, T1%, colon. So that's the field name. And we want to make that equal to test1. I'll just expand that column so that we can see what we're doing. So to convert the raw to a percent, we'll divide by 20 and times by 100. Now I think that should be fine. Let's just run that just to make sure that we're on the right track. And there it is there. JELFs, we've got 95. If we go back to the mark book and we see 19 out of 20, that would correspond to 95% for JELFs. So I'm happy with that. Let's go back into design view. And now we'll cut and paste that expression. And just change that to 2, test 2. Test 3. Actually, we'll need to change that to change the field name to T2, T3, and this one will be 4. Let's expand that out so that looks fine, and we want an average as well. So average, we sum them up and then divide them by how many we summed. So now, can we use these names? I think we can. Percent. Let's just expand that out. It's a bit fiddly. T4, so we're summing them, and then now we'll have to put brackets around them due to the order of precedence. Plus is a lower order of precedence than divide. So no, we don't need to divide by 20, we want to, we want to divide by 4 because there's 4 tests to get the average. Now let's run that. Hopefully everything should be fine. Okay, so there we go. We've got all the percentage marks and then the average. 65 looks like the average of those 4 numbers. This student, Hovey, got 190 and 155, so that would be quite a high average. And there we see. So I'm reasonably happy that I have created that query correctly. So let's save that, give it a reasonable name. QRY, so percent marks. Okay, so that's number 3 done. It's part 3 of this learning task. So let's look at part 4. Let's go back to that. Set up another query which shows ID, L name, F name, average, and only those students who scored above 80%. So I presume he's referring to the average percent there. Alright, so we're going to have to recreate that average percent. Alright, so let's go back into create, query design. So we need the ID, we'll close that. We need the first name, we need the last name. Right, and now we're going to have to create, what I'm going to do now is make a big long expression for calculating the average percentage mark. Now I can't access the fields from the other query. Well, I might be able to, I'm not sure how, but I'm going to do it this way. There might be other ways of doing this. Let's just pull this down, but I'm going to use the original table data. So let's call this percent again, colon. So we're going to need test 1, test 2, test 3, plus test 4. Alright, so there, now we need to divide them by 4 to average them. Divided by 4, so that's the average raw score. Now to convert that average raw score into a percentage, we need to multiply by 100 divided by 20. So divide by 20 to convert it into a fraction, then multiply by 100 to get it into a percentage. So times 100 colon 20, which as you can see is 5, so I could have made a shortcut and then just multiplied by 5 to convert that into a percentage. Now if you recall, the learning task stipulated, it's supposed to show the students that scored above 80%. So if you notice down here on the left, we've got criteria. We've got a series of row labels. Field is for the field names. Table is the table that we're getting the data from. Sort order, whether or not to show it. And criteria, that's what we want here. So we want to set the criteria. Remember last week, I think I defined what criteria means. I gave you the dictionary definition, which means a rule. So the rule for displaying data is the percent has got to be greater than 80. So we'll input that. Now we'll run that. And lo and behold, we have all the students that got greater than 80%. Let's save that before we lose it. QRY, let's call this top students because they got greater than 80%. And there it is there. Now we compare that with the other query. Let's see if we can find someone who got 80%. Now that he won't show up, or Layla won't show up because it has to be greater. I'll use the greater than sign. There we go, there's someone, 83%. Artemis, let's see if Artemis is there. Yes, he is, 83.75%. So that I'm satisfied that we have successfully completed now learning task 3. So let me know if you have any comments or questions. I will when you're watching this, it should be uploaded on YouTube. I will enable comments. So, yeah, or you can send me an email or ask me in class time if you've got any questions about these queries. That concludes my worked example for learning task 003.